It's me, Egbert, once again. I'm the new owner of this station. I went out and hired the best talk radio consultant, Jeff Allen from News Talk STL, and told him to hire the worst talent he could find. Jeff did exactly as I told him. Ladies and gentlemen, here are Brad and John.
And here we are on my first day of my rejuvenated, existence. Were you going to talk about it this break? Was that what we're going to talk about, John?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. I've owned the stations for like 26 years. And frankly, probably the worst investment I've ever made in my life, and especially as of late because the media business is in a turmoil. What's very sad to us in the radio business is we keep getting this narrative that, nobody listens to radio anymore, but yet if you look at the Nielsen numbers, we're still in the, depending upon which survey, high 80s, low 90s, which typically beats everything. I mean, as far as the number of people that listen to radio on a given week. The problem is perception, because everybody now thinks that if you want to advertise something, you got to be on YouTube or Facebook or one of the other socials and things like that. So the radio business has been very challenging. I will also normally not do this, but I will point the finger at what's frustrating to me is the players in the industry, the little players like me, are all very divisive amongst ourselves. If I were on fire, Tracy Ellis, her husband, Steve Casper, I can name other names. If I were on fire, they wouldn't cross the street to urinate to put me out. And what's sad about this is I see what's happening in other industries, especially like in YouTube, where the influencers who become successful in the YouTube have become successful because they're being promoted by their fellow influencers, if you know what I'm saying. You see this guy who is popular in this channel, he's got his own channel, he brings in technically one of his competitors and says, hey, if you like what I'm doing, check out what Jim over here is doing at his channel. Hey, here's Jim, tell us about what's going on in your channel, that kind of stuff.
All the car guys help everybody find the Cletus, Brad. Go ahead.
Find the Cletus?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, never mind. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm out to change that. And I'm out to change the respect that, I don't want to be one of them. And to the point where when we kid about the fact that Rick and Tracy, I have a long history with Tracy Ellis, believe it or not. She did her first radio show on this very radio station, KSOQ.
She did. Hey, okay, go ahead, Brad.
Going back to like 2009.
And you've told the story. You've introduced her to Brian Nieves, and you had a good relationship with her, and you got her up on the air, and you helped her with satellites. You were about to talk about yourself, Brad.
Well, I was about to talk myself is that I've got a terrible situation that I got into, unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond my control over 10 years ago. And quite honestly, a predatory lender. And I'm out from underneath that predatory lender officially yesterday at noon. And
congratulations, Brad.
And it's been a long, hard road to travel, mainly because of the fact that when you go to lending institutions and you tell them they would like to borrow some money for a radio station, after they get done laughing, they show you the door. And a number of different reasons for that. Probably the primary reason is that the collateral, if you get a loan for a house and if you don't make your house payments, they come and they foreclose your house. And there's a very structured system where they go through where they send you a couple certified letters, yada, yada, yada. And if you're not out in so many months or something like that, the sheriff comes and sticks all your stuff on the front lawn and the bank takes control of the property. The radio business is much different in the respect that the value in radio stations is the license, essentially the piece of paper given to you by the FCC, and it's very, 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 very difficult for what they call an adverse license transfers. In other words, a bank who would say, well, he owes us money, so you take that license out of his name.
So what you're saying is it was a good thing that you own the licenses.
Well, no, it's a neutral thing because the fact that to a certain extent they don't have any value. It's like anything in the world. If you have a rare 1965 Mickey Mantle card, that if you go down the street and you show that to 10 people, they go, yeah, big deal. But yet the 11th person you come across is a baseball collector. He goes, I'll give you $1 million for that. It all depends on what in other words, the downside for me is there's a value in it, but there's no value as far as the banks are concerned. So back in 2013, quite honestly, I was shown the door by my banker. Not that I was late on my payments or anything like that. He just essentially said that they became uncomfortable with lending into, a media business. And there's a crazy, weird reason about that, especially in the St. Louis area, because one of the big owners of radio stations is a banker. And I won't get into that because that gets to be sort of complicated. But anyway.
And you were talking about the good news yesterday and what it means for our listeners, Brad.
Well, I'm going to because a lot of things that I sort of put on hold because of the fact that, quite honestly, I didn't know what my future was going to be. I mean, there was a point where at one point in time I was just going to essentially say to this person who was my, note holder, hey, good luck. Here's the keys to the radio station. Have fun. Hopefully you can do something with it and just walk away from it. Although that's not necessarily in my nature. I've never done that before. And even to the point where that times have been, very, very, very rocky at times. I mean, I can go back in the timeline of me owning these stations. When we bought them first in late 97, early 98, things were good and we made money and it was a successful business until 2001. And then 9/11 came along, and what happened? Everybody went underground for a certain period of time while we figured out what the world's going to be after 9/11, and slowly but surely things got back to normal. Well, then 2008, 2009, 2010 came along, and the same situation. The economy cratered, and you had what was the thing where you cash for cars or whatever, you'd bring in your junk car.
Oh, yeah, cash for clunkers.
Cash for clunkers and stuff like that. And then most recently, the COVID thing. Now, sidetracking that, you also have the rise of social media, because if you go back to like 2001, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no Instagram.
Yeah, hey, listen, and you've covered that extensively, Brad. What does it mean for people that listen to the station, and what might be different about whether it's Westplex 107.1 or the station folks are listening to now?
Well, we're going to make some improvements down the road. I mean, there's not anything that's going to happen like overnight. Matter of fact, we've considered about making John Combest's top 3 into a top 4, but we thought that might be a little bit too radical. But
nobody wants that.
Right. But anyway, some things are going to change, and some of the ideas that I've had on hold, like, for example, the reason I actually GodSquad.cloud has been up for about a year, and I've really never done anything with it. And it's one of these things where...
I remember you telling us about it quite a while ago.
Right. And it's one of these things where sometimes, I watch these YouTube shorts, okay? And sometimes you see these, some of them are stupid, some of them are, it's people doing dance routines and stuff like that. And sometimes you see some very inspirational things. And a couple things have hit me recently about the idea being that, there's two types of people. There are people that dream about things and people that do things. And the idea being that most people dream about things. Most people say, man, I wish I would have gone back to college and got my degree, or, blah, 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 blah. And other people who, had that dream when they were in their teens and early 20s, and at 40 or 50 decide, what, I'm going back to college, I'm getting that degree. And those are the people that I appreciate because of the fact that, you look at the visionaries that have made this country. You look at, you go back through the old timers, the Fords and the Schwabs and the Edisons and things like that. And you have a new generation of, the Steve Jobs and the Bill Gates and the Elon Musks and things like that. And especially with Elon Musk, you look at his past, and he was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth. At one point in time, he was working a farm, I believe, out up in Canada or something like that. He was some kind of like a stable boy or some crazy stuff like that. And the idea being is that, quite honestly, through the years, I've been beat down by a lot of different things and very frustrated. And the thing that sort of drives me nuts is, for whatever reason, I have a lot of people that come after me all the time. I don't really quite understand that. And I have people that maybe they don't know my nature, but I'm not an offensive guy. I'm a guy that's usually on defense. And, it's the nature of human beings. I mean, you see it in politics. It's become like sport. Politics has turned into blood sport in that, how can we, essentially cripple our, competitor? How can we make him, listen to some of the radio where you hear the negative ads. And Adam Schnelting didn't show up for this vote, that kind of stuff. Anyway, moving forward, my health... keeping good with me, some improvements, and matter of fact, this station may evolve a little bit as well too. And I've already talked to Egbert about this, and we may be making some changes as far as the positioning of the statement, the station, and obviously the situation with our tower situation. So things as far as that's
nice,
concerned.
Brad. That's exciting. And let's remember too. Let's go back to something for a minute. The fact that some people would go after you for this or that, isn't that a fact of life and the fact of owning a radio station? Is you're going to have some people that are disgruntled, or some people, maybe not disgruntled is the right word, but people who were just nattering nabobs and negativity and negative Nancy's and others that are also in the industry. And one of the great things about you, Brad, is that you're always innovating. You're always open to new ideas. There's nobody that can say that you are closed-minded about things that might work or new technology.
Well, I've tried.
But let's go back to the personalities real quick. I'm guessing that one of the things that goes with owning a radio station is that other radio station owners won't like you and they'll badmouth you.
Well, and I don't quite understand that, because the fact that like, for example, sometimes I will have, this happened to me last week. I'm calling on somebody for some advertising, and they said to me, well, I'm already on your competitor. And they didn't say what station. And I knew they were talking about another radio station. I go, oh, so are you on YouTube? And they go, no, I'm on your competitor, another radio station. I say other radio stations aren't my competitors. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and to a certain extent, billboards and newspaper and television, that's my competitor. And they go, well, don't you compete against other radio stations? Yeah, but the problem is that if you look at the aggregate amount of money that's being spent in St. Louis on radio, it's a drop in the bucket as being compared with what's spent on social media. And I think even to the point where the thing that's somewhat frustrating to me is that my experience with some of the chambers of commerce, I'm not going to mention any, but they promote the fact that, hey, do business locally. But yet, what do they have? Seminars all the time on how to make your Facebook page better, how to improve your performance on your YouTube page. You go like, okay, no, hold on a minute. Aren't you like speaking out of both sides of your mouth? Because you're saying do business locally, but yet, send some money to Zuckerberg and send some money to the Alphabet Boys and, that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? Does that make any sense to you, or am I like being just a weirdo when I bring up things like that?
No, it makes perfect sense. And let's go back to personalities too, because I think it's important that one of the great things about you too, Brad, is that your your goal is not to ingratiate yourself with other people just for the sake of winning their approval or their love or their support. So because of that, you happen to be outspoken. You happen to not be – you've talked before about it, Brad, about your unwillingness to, quote, play games, unquote, and to be deceptive and to be Machiavellian. And part of that, I think, is just there will be a handful of people who don't like you. And I think for every person like that, there's people who speak well of you in the industry. I was talking to somebody who was a radio host on a different station over the weekend who's like, Brad gets it. Brad understands what this whole world is like. Brad understands the way the industry works. He has never reached out to you. This person has never once reached out to you and say, hey, thanks, Brad. Thanks for everything you've done for the radio industry. Why? Because if we have a problem with somebody, we're going to go on the internet and complain about it, and we're going to go on X and make an anonymous account. But we're not going to call up a Brad Hildebrand and say, Brad, I appreciate what you do for the radio industry.
Well,
so you should know that you see the tip of the iceberg when people criticize you or get in your way. You don't see the mountain, or I should say you don't see what's below the water of people who appreciate what you do, Brad.
Yeah, well, and that's very nice to hear that somebody said something nice about me. But let me just say one other thing, which is sort of interesting to me. The radio business there's two levels of the radio business. And the interesting aspect of this is there's the level that, the people that are, selling advertising and being on the air and the general managers and stuff like that. And then there's the engineering aspect of the radio business. I have in my phone book right now the names and phone numbers of almost all the engineers here in town, okay? Even if they work for my competitors, I could call any of them up and say, Joe, whoever, I got a problem, explain, give me a little bit of advice. Have you had this problem before? And they would help me. And the flip of that is, and I'm not trying to, aggrandize myself, but there have been occasions when, matter of fact, one occasion probably about 2 or 3 years ago where a major radio station, I showed up at their transmitter site. I got access to their transmitter site. I got them back on the air. and to the point where, and once again, that's what I find sort of interesting, because the engineering community is more of a, hey, reach out and help everybody, whereas the opposite end of that. And one of the situations that I have, and I kid about the fact with Rick and Tracy all the time, that I had a fateful meeting with Rick and Tracy, the last time I ever met with them in person, when Rick looked me in the eyes and said to me, I was trying to help him, and he looked me in the eyes and said, "We don't trust radio people." And I thought to myself, okay, what are you trying to be? Aren't you? This is before they had their radio stations on the air. Aren't you trying to be radio people? So in other words, you don't trust yourself. And the interesting thing about that one is, once again, Rick and Tracy beat their chests about how they're good Christians. I don't think good Christians look across the table at someone and says, "I don't trust you." You know what I'm saying? I mean, to me,
I do. And I think the important thing too is that, as you mentioned at the beginning of this block, Brad, that you're out from under the subjugation of somebody who owned a property and you felt that you were subjugated underneath them. And it's a brand new day, Brad, and you're moving forward, and you're not thinking about, slights in the past, and you're not thinking of all the things that you did for other people and their lack of gratitude, but you're thinking moving forward about the brighter days that are ahead.
Well, one of the frustrating things for me, this particular situation where I had a private note holder for my note, to make, how do I put this in a right way? I was given a number a month and a half ago of what it would take to get out from underneath this person and pay the note off. And when I said, okay, fine, I'll do that, the price jumped by another $10,000. And it's like, okay, you're going to be a butthead about this. I totally understand. And I'm not trying to say I'm out for revenge, but you know what? That person walks out in front of me, and I'm driving down, in a shopping center, and they walk off that sidewalk. I just may forget which pedal is the accelerator and which pedal is the brake. You know what I'm saying, John?
I know. Well, you're a big fan of the Salvation Army right there in Harvester. And again, the great thing is you're not thinking about the people that slighted you, Brad, or an increase of a mere $10,000, but you're thinking of the brighter days are ahead, and you're taking action. You're not looking back and thinking in your rearview mirror outside the Salvation Army. You're thinking about those plans moving forward. And I think that's where you should stay.
And I'm going to bring in Mike Lindell and take another picture with him so people can make fun of me.
But people aren't going to like that Facebook post, Brad.
You would be surprised how many people said, "I can't believe you put a picture with you and Mike Lindell up on your Facebook page." And I'm going like, once again, I mean, you may think the guy's a horrible guy. That's your opinion. I see a different side of the guy. I see a different side of the guy. It's like, you hear these stories about Trump all the time. I mean, Trump, going behind the scenes and helping people out and, and making calls for people and, giving people, I mean, I remember Joe Buck. There was a story about Joe Buck. You know what Joe Buck used to get mad about his dad about?
His dad did not approve of Troy Aikman.
No, his dad was an incredibly heavy tipper, and to the point where...
Oh, yeah, you've told this story on our show before. Go ahead.
Right. Joe complained about the fact that there used to be an elevator in Busch Stadium, too. There was an elevator operator that took you from one floor to another, something like that. Literally, this is for you young people. Once upon a time, there were people actually in the elevator that ran the elevator. But anyway, there were elevator operators, and he routinely would tip the elevator operator a $100 bill. Take them from floor 2 to floor 3. Here's a $100 bill. Thank you very much. And it's that kind of thing that you look at that and you go like, wow, that guy's very generous. He could be Mr. Tightwad. He could be like, hey, it's your job to, you didn't run that elevator quick enough. I should have been there in 2.3 seconds instead of 2.9. You know what I mean? He could have been a butthead, but he wasn't. But anyway.
And it would have been, if he was a butthead, it would have ended up in Jerry Berger's column, When Jerry wasn't standing in line at a Kinko's, he could, Jerry could maybe put it in, somebody could write it for Jerry, and Jerry could put it in his column.
You're dating yourself, John.
I am dating myself.
There's a lot of people who go, Jerry Berger.
I grew up reading Jerry Berger. Wasn't it great? I mean, we know Jerry didn't actually write the stuff, but still, it was a funny column.
My sister worked with Jerry Berger.
No way. Are you serious?
Yeah, when she was at the Globe. Jerry originally was at the Globe for a long time. My sister.
Did she fetch his cigarettes?
No, my sister had all sorts of Jerry Berger stories. I mean, she would tell all these bizarre Jerry Berger stories because Jerry Berger was an interesting guy behind the scenes. Matter of fact,
is there a normal Jerry Berger story?
Well,
that's what would surprise me.
Do you know who has a lot of Jerry Berger stories?
I don't know.
Shelley.
Wow, why is that?
Because her father used to run the coal hole. Remember the coal hole?
Oh, yeah, I remember her talk. She was telling us about this.
Yes.
Yeah.
The coal hole.
Which, by the way, any place that's got a hole in the name.
Well,
I mean,
the coal hole was this very well, I shouldn't say prestigious, but it was the place to be seen in the St. Louis area. If all the movers and shakers, it was a restaurant in Clayton, and Shelley's father owned the coal hole, and she talked about Jerry Berger would come in there all the time, and she would tell me stories about her dad when Jerry Berger were good friends, and they would talk back and forth, and I believe she met him on several occasions. If you don't, I remember Shelley's movie, I Was Born a Coal Hole's Daughter. If you don't know who Jerry Berger is, he was the local gossip columnist. Joe Holloman tries to fill that void, but he was the local gossip columnist for years for the Globe Democrat, and that's the Post-Dispatch. And he was an interesting character behind the scenes as well, too. Interesting in the respect that he had a great big Hollywood reputation. At one point in time, he was a very prestigious, I believe, promoter, manager.
He was a publicist.
Right,
yeah.
and he rubbed elbows with, at the time, the very, Class A, creme de la creme of the entertainment industry. I mean, he literally was at their house, knew them personally, went out to dinner with them, that kind of a thing. And then he came to St. Louis, and everything went downhill from there. But that's a whole other story. Matter of fact, the reason it went downhill is because he bought a bunch of real estate on Easton Avenue, saying this is going to be the next.
I thought you were going to say he bought a bunch of radio stations. Brad, congratulations on this new day in your career.
We'll see what happens, John. And
We'll
by the way,
tomorrow.
if you need a prayer, 25.
I know. Hey, 25 God Squad.
25 God Squad. That's a real phone number, and I'm not making it up.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?